So what's up, YouTubers? It's Mark here again with Exoticcar PlayPlace. And today I'm going to talk about how to do maintenance and still afford to drive a supercar like a E60 M5 that I'm driving here today. Well, a big part of that has to do with being able to afford it, not just to buy the car outright, but how to afford to maintain the car. Now, I'm the first guy that's going to advocate for good maintenance. So first, let's get that on the table. You want to maintain these cars properly so that every time you take it out for a drive that you have no problems. Obviously, nothing worse than having a Ferrari going to start it somewhere and it won't run. So maintenance is a big factor. So let's get that on the table. Now, I have a little different philosophy than some people, and I know there's been some YouTubers out there that have commented that their philosophy around maintenance has to do with, I don't touch the car. I have a mechanic that does that because when I touch the car and I do my own maintenance, I can pretty much kiss away, depreciation or value of the car because I don't have records. Well, I totally don't necessarily agree with that. I mean, there's some value in that concept, but the point being that records are important, 100%. Whether you have an independent shop or a dealership do it is important. But I would say the key here is filling in the blanks. If you have a car that's 1 year old, 2 years old, people want to see dealer servicing. If you have a car that is 10 years old, 15 years old, you have an older Gallardo or a Ferrari 360, 430, something like that, service is critical. More important even than necessarily, in my opinion, where it's serviced. As long as you've got a trail of service records that tell you you've had repairs, you've had maintenance, you've had oil changes and all those other pieces. I'm more of a believer in doing the maintenance and ensuring the maintenance is done and you have a good track record and you're doing all the right things. I'm also a believer in, if any of you guys have ever heard a book called The Wealthy Barber, that is a concept that is based on a penny saved is a penny earned. Now, I don't want to sound cheap. Obviously, if you're driving a supercar, it's probably not your first priority saving every last penny, because obviously a supercar isn't necessarily the best investment. But that being said, I truly believe anything that you could protect yourself on or service yourself is going to be money in the bank. So while there are some cases where you might have slightly less resale, or resale might be potential impact by doing your own maintenance or having an independent shop doing it, it may play a factor. I would say a person that owns a car for 5 years, maybe 10 years, you will save a lot of money and you will come out ahead, in my mind, as long as you're doing all the right things and you're following, the maintenance schedules and whatnot. Again, that is critical. But again, throwing your money away on service that is done just to say that I had it done at the dealer isn't necessarily the money best spent. So I'll give you some examples. I have a mechanic friend that works on these cars, and his ideas are around maintenance. He loves in and out jobs. He loves brake jobs. He loves the flushes and the coolant jobs and a thermostat job and those little jobs, maybe a clutch job at the biggest. He loves those jobs, and he even admitted that's the money makers. And that's also the lowest risk from a mechanic's standpoint. The jobs that are in and out in 2 or 3 hours, maybe a half day, the car is in and out and done. He's making the money there. So what does that tell you? That tells you that largely those are the jobs that you could probably do yourself and have the biggest impact on your own financial situation. So again, if you are somewhat mechanically inclined, I want to say that is a task worth accomplishing. Obviously, is do your own brake job. If you're mechanically inclined, have the tools and do the research. Do the oil change if you do the right things. Again, make sure you do the research and you're doing all the right things. Obviously, there are techniques in any particular service. But, look at those factors. If it's within your capabilities, you've got an evening at home, you're not doing much, why not do that oil change? It's just a little bit of time. Versus maybe watching TV, potentially make some money for you. I'll give you a couple of examples. Years ago, I had a 3 Series BMW. I knew it had a thermostat issue because the car wouldn't heat up properly. It would stay cold. So thermostat was always wide open. So I did the research to find out that in fact was the problem. That between and a little bit of troubleshooting, realized that it really was more of an issue of a thermostat not operating. So I had to get a thermostat replaced. So I called the dealer, and you know what the dealer said? The dealer told me that you need a thermostat. We'll do a flush for you, a coolant flush thermostat. And they gave me a quote on that job at a quote of about $850. New thermostat, labor, antifreeze, flush. I couldn't believe it. I almost fell over when somebody told me $850 for a thermostat on a BMW. That blew my mind. I couldn't have any of that. I'm not going to have any part of basically leaving a $1,000 bill on the table. So I took it upon my own and decided to source the parts, grabbed all the goodies. I basically had everything, all parts in hand for about $100. For $100 and an afternoon in the garage, I did the exact service that those people quoted me on, which was coolant flush. I did the thermostat change. Although it was a knuckle scraper and it was a pain in the ass, it wasn't an easy job to do. I will confess that really at the end of the day, it was a real bonus having that extra $600-700 in my hand. And yeah, for a little inconvenience and getting my hands dirty and whatnot, I saved a lot of money. So that truly is my philosophy on that. The other thing is, now around that, if you're going to drive a car like this E60 M5, for example, another important thing to consider, maybe you're not as mechanically inclined, and that's okay too. Maybe you don't have the time to work on the car, that's also okay. So what you want to do then is consider, okay, if I'm taking my car in for servicing, do your homework, go into the shop loaded with information. So if you know you're going in for some servicing, you want to do an oil change, spark plugs, air filter, for example, things like that, make sure that you understand kind of what you're up against. Never hurts to do a little research. Doesn't mean you're necessarily going to do the job. And I'll give you another example. I took this E60 M5 into a local BMW authorized factory service shop here in my city in Edmonton. And I'll tell you right now, they told me basically when they plugged in my key fob, they told me you needed to change this. Okay, that was your service. That's fine. Then I asked for an estimate, and they gave me a big dollar amount. And they had a huge dollar tag to air filter service. And I had to ask, why is it so expensive to do an air filter on this car? I couldn't understand what the deal was with that. An air filter it was a pretty substantial time tracking that they had associated with that. So I talked to the service writer and I quizzed them on that. Why is it so much for an air filter service? Well, so they told me the parts, which weren't necessarily that cheap for the BMW, of course, and there's two of them on this car. But part of what kind of had me, kind of rooked in there was they told me that the labor was involved in getting at the air filter meant removing the bumper and some fairings. Well, if I'm just one of those clueless people that walks in and just throws a blank check on the table, you might just pay that bill and be done with it. But I had to ask those questions, and I did a little research, and I quickly found out that, in fact, that's not required at all. Although it's not your quick snap and go to snap down special like you'll find in a lot of cars, it wasn't that involved in changing an air filter, or two of them in this case. So I chose to decline that particular service, and I took care of it myself for much less money, of course. So that's an example, and I don't want to necessarily throw that person under. You know what? In some cases, I know dishonesty is always a question in some shops, and you really should trust the shop you're taking your car in for servicing at. But sometimes the service writers, they don't know every intricate detail on this, and maybe their inexperience plays a factor here. So I think that's truly what happened in this case, was inexperience was a problem here. And they didn't really know what they were talking about. So all I can say is, going into a service, if you're not working on it yourself, make sure that you've done some homework so you have an idea what it takes to do some of this servicing. So when you get that bill, that you kind of have an idea. Now we all know that typically the factory service centers typically have book times associated with any of these service items. So I'm not entirely sure how these numbers became so askew, but either way, it's one of those things that you want to do some inspection, investigation on prior to taking your car to the shop, because you can save yourself a lot of money that way. And also, do you need to do that? Do you need to do a cabin air filter every single time? I don't know, maybe you do, maybe you don't. Depends where you live. If it's based on time, you live in dusty roads, dusty conditions, yeah, you do. If you live in immaculate conditions, maybe you don't. You know what, those are things that you can save money on. And on a car like this E60 M5, any place that you can be creative is probably welcome. It's going to save you a lot of money. So everybody, in summary, I hope you enjoyed this video. And like always, be sure to subscribe, share, like, and comment below what your thoughts are around this. Again, you know, to own a supercar doesn't mean it has to break the bank. It really doesn't. To own a premium luxury car doesn't mean you have to break the bank either. What it does mean is you have to be a little more savvy. And you know what? Hey, if you're a multi-millionaire 20 times over, by all means, drop the car off, pick it up, pay the bill, and move on. But if you want to be sustainable and you want to own these cars long term, and you don't necessarily have millions in the bank, you can afford to own a Ferrari or Lamborghini. You just have to be a little more savvy on the maintenance. Don't cut on the maintenance, don't short it out, and do realize that, of course, maintenance does come at a significant cost, even when you're doing some of it yourself. But be sure that you know you can save some money. As you will see in my upcoming video, I have a video coming up where, and a lot of you guys who have been following me know that my X5 diesel, that has bad airbags, and I've just received them in the mail. I'm going to be installing that, and I'll be demonstrating what a retrofit looks like. I'll be doing that full repair, and I'll be giving you the play-by-play on that. So stick around, make sure you catch that video, but if you subscribe, you be sure that you come by and watch that how-to video. That's an example of some of the things that you too can do as a car owner without breaking the bank. If you're a little creative, you're able to find these parts, and you're able to do some of this work yourself. So again, thanks everybody. I hope you enjoyed it. We will talk to you on the next one. Bye-bye.